He humiliated me while I was pregnant, in front of his friends, his family, and people who were supposed to respect me. I stood there holding my stomach, swallowing my tears, while the man who promised to protect me laughed along with them. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. That night, I was 8 months pregnant and already exhausted. My back hurt, my feet were swollen, and every movement felt heavy. Still, I told myself to go. Ethan said it was important. His family was coming, and a few close friends too. I wore a loose dress and tried to look calm, even though my body felt like it was carrying more than just a baby. At first, dinner was quiet. People talked about work, food, and small things that didn't matter. I sat carefully, one hand resting on my stomach, feeling my baby move. I thought maybe the night would pass without trouble. I was wrong. Ethan started making jokes. At first, they sounded harmless. Then they didn't. He laughed about how emotional I had become, how I cried over nothing. He looked at me and said pregnancy had made me slow and needy. Someone laughed. Then another person joined in. I tried to smile, hoping he would stop. Instead, he went further. He talked about my body, how I didn't look like myself anymore. He said marriage wasn't what he expected, that everything now revolved around me and the baby. He said it like a joke, but his eyes were cold. He didn't look at me with love. He looked at me like I was a problem. I waited for someone to defend me. No one did. His mother looked away. His friends kept eating. A few people laughed like this was normal. My face burned, but I stayed quiet. I didn't want to cry there. I didn't want to give him that. Ethan noticed my silence and smirked. He said I was being too sensitive and that I couldn't take a joke anymore. He said I should be grateful he was still patient with me. The word burden slipped out of his mouth, light and careless, like it meant nothing. It meant everything to me. In that moment, I understood something clearly. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't stress. This was him choosing to put me down where others could see it. He wanted control. He wanted me small and quiet. I held my stomach tighter, feeling my baby move, and I told myself to remember this feeling. Not the pain, but the truth. I was standing in a room full of people, yet I had never felt more alone. And that was the night something inside me changed. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about how everything had slowly gone wrong. It wasn't sudden. It didn't happen in one day. It started quietly, so quietly that I kept making excuses for him. When I found out I was pregnant, Ethan smiled and hugged me, but something in his eyes felt distant. I told myself it was fear, pressure, responsibility. I believed love would bring him back. As the months passed, the warmth between us faded. He stopped asking how I felt. He stopped touching my hand or checking if I was tired. When I complained about pain or sickness, he sighed like I was asking for too much. If I needed rest, he called me lazy. If I worried about the baby, he said I was dramatic. Money became another way he changed. Before, we talked about expenses together. After my pregnancy, he started deciding everything alone. He told me what I could spend and what I couldn't. If I bought something for myself or the baby, he asked for explanations. He reminded me that I wasn't working anymore and that everything came from him. Each time he said it, I felt smaller. He also began criticizing my health. He watched what I ate, not with care, but with judgment. If I gained weight, he made comments. If I was tired, he said I was weak. He compared me to other women, saying they handled pregnancy better. I stopped sharing how I felt because every word turned into a reason for him to judge me. There were moments I noticed the warning signs, but I pushed them away. When he raised his voice, I blamed stress. When he ignored me for days, I told myself he needed space. When he spoke to me like I didn't matter, I thought maybe I was expecting too much. I wanted peace, so I chose silence. Slowly, my world became smaller. I stopped visiting friends because Ethan complained. I stopped calling family because he said they interfered. Most days, it was just me and the walls of our home. I felt lonely even when he was there. I felt invisible. I began depending on him for everything, and he knew it. He reminded me that I needed him. He said no one else would take care of me the way he did. I believed him more than I believed myself. Looking back, I see how carefully it all happened. Not with force, but with words. Not with shouting, but with control. By the time I understood what was happening, I was already isolated, questioning my own thoughts, and wondering how I had lost myself so quietly. A few days later, something happened that changed me completely. Ethan had a friend over that evening. I wasn't part of their conversation, and I didn't try to be. I stayed in the bedroom, resting, letting them talk freely. I thought nothing of it at first. Then I heard my name. I didn't mean to listen, but once I did, I couldn't stop. Ethan's voice was calm, almost relaxed. He sounded nothing like the man who snapped at me daily. He was laughing. His friend asked how married life was going, how he felt about becoming a father. Ethan sighed and said he never wanted this. He said the baby wasn't part of his plan. He said everything felt like a trap now. Each word hit me harder than the last. I stood still, holding my breath, hoping I misunderstood. I hadn't. His friend joked that at least I'd calm down after the baby arrived. Ethan laughed and said I wouldn't be going anywhere anyway. He said I had no job, no money, and no real place to go. He said it like a fact, like something he had already decided. There was no guilt in his voice. Just confidence. That was the moment my heart went quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt cold. All the hope I had been holding on to disappeared in seconds. I finally understood the truth I had been avoiding. He didn't see me as his partner. He saw me as someone stuck with him, someone easy to control. I slowly walked back to the bed and sat down. My hands rested on my stomach, and for the first time I felt clear instead of afraid. I realized my fear had been feeding him. My dependence made him feel powerful. My silence made him comfortable. I thought about every time I had apologized when I wasn't wrong. Every time I begged for kindness. Every time I lowered myself just to keep peace. He wasn't confused. He wasn't struggling. He knew exactly what he was doing. That night, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't confront him. I wouldn't ask questions or demand explanations. I knew the answers now. Crying wouldn't save me. Arguing wouldn't change him. I lay there listening to their laughter from the other room, feeling my baby move gently. I promised myself something in that silence. I promised that I would not stay weak. I would not let him decide my worth or my future. He thought I was trapped, but he was wrong. From that moment on, I stopped reacting and started thinking. I watched. I listened. And I began planning how to take my power back without him ever seeing it coming. After that night, I changed the way I moved and spoke. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I didn't try to explain myself anymore. I became quiet in a way that was different from before. This time, my silence was a choice. Ethan noticed the change, but he misunderstood it. He thought I had finally accepted my place. He thought I had given up. That made him careless. He spoke freely around me, not worrying about his words. He stopped hiding his behavior because he believed I was too weak to do anything about it. I paid attention to everything. When he controlled money, I wrote it down. When he insulted me or spoke to me with disrespect, I remembered the exact words. When he ignored my needs or showed no concern for my health, I noted the dates and moments in my mind. I didn't react. I observed. At home, I kept things calm. I cooked, cleaned, and spoke politely. Inside, I was growing stronger. Each quiet day helped me see things clearly. I saw patterns I had missed before. I saw how planned his behavior was. Nothing was accidental. At night, when he slept, I sat awake thinking. I thought about what kind of life I wanted for my child. I thought about safety, peace, and dignity. I realized I didn't need his permission to want better. I didn't need his approval to prepare for a future without him. I started organizing my thoughts and my strength. I saved important papers quietly. I memorized details that mattered. I learned how to survive without depending on his moods or promises. Every small step made me feel more in control. Ethan grew more confident as I grew quieter. He bragged more. He complained more. He acted like he owned everything, including me. He didn't notice the shift happening right in front of him. He was too busy enjoying the power he thought he had. There were moments when I wanted to speak up, to defend myself, to ask why. But I reminded myself that confrontation would only give him a chance to twist things. Silence was safer. Silence was smarter. I stopped seeing myself as helpless. I stopped seeing him as someone I needed. I began to see him clearly, without fear or hope blurring my vision. He wasn't stronger than me. He was just louder. Each day, my calm became my shield. While he believed I was breaking, I was building something quietly inside myself. And with every careless word he spoke, he gave me more reason, and more strength, to keep going. When the day finally came, everything moved faster than I expected. The pain started early in the morning, sharp and steady. I tried calling Ethan, but he didn't answer at first. When he did, his voice sounded annoyed, not worried. He asked if it couldn't wait. I didn't argue. I grabbed my bag and went to the hospital alone. Labor was long and exhausting. The room felt cold and bright, and every minute tested my strength. Nurses came and went, offering support and kind words. Strangers showed me more care in those hours than my husband had in months. I focused on breathing, on staying present, on bringing my baby into the world safely. Ethan arrived hours later. He didn't rush in with concern. He walked in like he had been interrupted. He complained about traffic and said he had important things to do. He looked around the room, then at me, and asked why everything took so long. I stared at him, too tired to feel surprised. When my baby was placed in my arms, something inside me shifted. The weight was small, but the feeling was powerful. I looked at that tiny face and felt a kind of love I had never known. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the pain, not the fear, not Ethan's presence. Ethan stood nearby, scrolling through his phone, barely looking. He made a comment about how tired he was and how this would change his routine. His words faded into the background. I wasn't listening anymore. I was focused on the life resting against my chest. As I held my baby, a clear thought settled in my mind. This child would never grow up watching their mother be disrespected. I would not allow that. I understood then that waiting for Ethan to change was useless. He had shown me who he was, and I finally believed him. I didn't feel anger in that moment. I felt calm. I felt awake. The hope I once had for our marriage quietly disappeared, replaced by something stronger. Responsibility. Purpose. Resolve. That day wasn't just the birth of my child. It was the birth of a new part of me. I stopped seeing myself as someone who needed saving. I became someone who would protect, no matter what. As the room grew quiet and the nurses dimmed the lights, I held my baby close and made a silent promise. From this moment on, I would choose strength over fear, truth over comfort, and action over waiting. Everything was about to change. I didn't leave in anger. I didn't pack in a rush or wait for the perfect moment. I waited for the right one. Ethan was away that morning, busy with his own plans, sure that everything at home was exactly where he left it. He had no idea that I was already done. I packed only what mattered. Clothes for my baby. Important papers. A few personal things that made me feel grounded. I moved quietly, slowly, making sure nothing felt rushed or careless. There was no fear in my hands anymore. Just focus. Before leaving, I looked around the house one last time. It didn't feel like home. It felt like a place where I had learned a hard lesson. I closed the door gently behind me and didn't look back. I went somewhere safe. Somewhere warm. People there welcomed me without questions or judgment. They didn't tell me what I should have done earlier. They didn't blame me. They simply helped. For the first time in a long while, I felt protected. I settled into a small space, simple but peaceful. Nights were quiet. My baby slept close to me, and that closeness gave me strength. Each day felt lighter than the last. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. I could breathe. I began taking careful steps forward. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. I followed the right process, one step at a time. I stayed patient and calm, knowing that rushing would only create mistakes. Everything I did had a purpose. Ethan noticed my absence later than I expected. When he finally reached out, his tone wasn't worried. It was annoyed. He assumed I would return once I felt tired or overwhelmed. He believed I would realize I couldn't manage on my own. That belief gave him comfort. I didn't correct him. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Silence was still my strength. Days passed. Then more days. I stayed where I was. I focused on caring for my baby and building stability. Each small success made me stronger. Each quiet morning reminded me why I left. Ethan grew impatient. He tried different approaches, but none of them mattered. He still thought control would pull me back. He didn't understand that control had already lost its power over me. I wasn't waiting for approval. I wasn't hoping for change. I was moving forward with intention. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was planning. It was choosing peace over chaos. And while Ethan believed I would eventually fold, I was proving, slowly and steadily, that I never intended to. At first, Ethan acted like nothing serious was happening. He sent short messages, asking when I planned to come back. When I didn't respond the way he expected, his tone changed. He reminded me of everything he had done for me. He said I was being ungrateful. He said I was hurting the family. I read the words without reacting. When guilt didn't work, anger followed. His messages became sharp and demanding. He accused me of being selfish. He said I was overreacting and making problems out of nothing. He warned me that life would be hard without him. I could feel his frustration growing through every sentence. Then came the sudden concern. He asked if I was okay. He asked about the baby. He said he was worried and wanted to fix things. The shift was obvious. It wasn't care, it was panic. For the first time, he didn't know how to control the situation. I stayed calm. I didn't explain myself or defend my choices. I answered only when necessary, and even then, I kept my words short. My focus stayed on my child and building a steady routine. Each day, I felt more grounded and less shaken by his attempts. Ethan started losing his confidence. He repeated himself. He contradicted his own words. One moment he blamed me, the next he blamed stress. The strong voice he once used was gone. In its place was uncertainty. I realized something important then. His power had always come from my reactions. My fear, my tears, my need to be understood, that was what kept him in control. Now that those were gone, he had nothing to stand on. I didn't feel proud or cruel watching him struggle. I felt clear. I understood that this was the natural result of choosing myself. I wasn't punishing him. I was protecting my peace. As time passed, his messages slowed. When they came, they carried less force. He was realizing that I wasn't coming back to beg or explain. I wasn't asking for permission to live my life. I spent my days caring for my baby, planning ahead, and building strength quietly. I didn't rush. I didn't doubt myself. The fear that once lived inside me had faded. The balance had shifted completely. Ethan was no longer the center of my world. He was just someone reacting to a reality he could no longer control. And for the first time, I was the one standing steady, choosing my future without looking back. The shift became impossible to ignore. What Ethan once managed with confidence began to fall apart. Responsibilities he never thought about before landed fully on him. Bills, obligations, and quiet consequences followed one after another. There was no one left to absorb the weight for him. Questions started reaching him from people he trusted. At first, he tried to control the story the same way he always had. He painted himself as the one who was wronged, the one left behind without warning. But the truth has a way of surfacing when lies get tired. Details came out slowly, then clearly. His words, his behavior, the patterns he thought no one noticed were seen for what they were. The image he had protected so carefully cracked. People who once stayed silent began to look at him differently. I didn't push the truth forward. I didn't argue or defend myself. I didn't chase understanding. I stayed where I was, steady and quiet, focused on building a safe life for my child. The facts spoke on their own without my voice rising. Ethan felt the change. Conversations that once ended in agreement now ended in silence. Support he expected no longer came easily. He was forced to face himself without someone else to blame. The distance between who he thought he was and who he had shown himself to be became clear. That gap weighed on him more than any argument ever could. For the first time, he couldn't talk his way out of the situation. I didn't feel satisfaction watching this happen. I felt relief. Relief that I no longer had to prove my reality. Relief that I didn't have to fight to be believed. People reached out to me with quiet understanding. No drama. No sides taken loudly. Just acknowledgement. That was enough. Ethan tried to regain control, but the effort felt empty. The foundation he stood on had already broken. He was facing consequences shaped by his own choices, not my actions. Through it all, I stayed calm. I kept my focus narrow and steady. My strength wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was consistent. And that quiet strength did what arguments never could. It stood firm while everything he built on control slowly fell away. One afternoon, Ethan finally showed up in person. He looked different. Not just tired, but smaller somehow. The confidence he once carried was gone. He stood there unsure of himself, like he didn't know which words would work anymore. He started talking quickly, as if afraid I might stop him. He said he was sorry. He said he made mistakes. He said he never meant for things to go this far. His voice sounded heavy, but something about it felt empty. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask about the baby. He talked about himself and everything he had lost. He said his life had fallen apart. He said nothing felt stable anymore. He spoke about loneliness, pressure, and regret. I listened quietly, holding my child close. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't react. As he talked, I noticed what was missing. There was no real understanding of the pain he caused. No mention of my fear, my isolation, or the nights I cried alone. His apologies circled around his discomfort, his consequences, his losses. He asked for another chance. Not because he had changed, but because he didn't like where he had ended up. He wanted things to go back to how they were, when he felt in control. That truth was clear to me now. I looked at him and felt nothing. No anger. No hope. Just clarity. I realized that this moment was not about fixing the past. It was about closing it. I told him calmly that I had moved forward. I said I was focused on my child and building a stable life. I didn't argue or accuse. I didn't raise my voice. I simply spoke the truth as it was. He seemed shocked by my calm. He expected tears or anger. He expected bargaining. When none of that came, he looked lost. I understood then that his regret wasn't about love or responsibility. It was about losing comfort, control, and the image he once had. That wasn't enough for me anymore. When he left, there was no dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet ending. I closed the door and felt lighter than I had in years. That was my closure. Not his apology, but my peace. After Ethan left, my life settled into a rhythm I had never known before. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't need to be. There were challenges, sleepless nights, and moments when I doubted myself, but every day I felt more in control. I built my life around what mattered most: my child, my safety, and my dignity. I found a home that felt like a sanctuary. Quiet, safe, and mine. Every corner of it reminded me that I had chosen this life for myself, not because anyone else told me it was possible. I organized my days carefully, balancing care for my baby with the small tasks that kept life steady. Slowly, peace returned. Not loud, not flashy, but deep and lasting. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't want to see Ethan struggle. That chapter had closed because I had decided it. Freedom, not punishment, became my victory. I realized that no humiliation he had caused could touch me anymore. It belonged to the past, and I had left it there. People around me noticed the change. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't anxious. I carried myself with calm confidence, and it drew respect naturally. My strength didn't need to be proven. It was visible simply because I stood steady and refused to be shaken. I focused on building a future that reflected my choices. I made plans for work, for savings, and for stability. Every decision, small or large, reminded me that I was no longer dependent on anyone who had ever tried to control me. I felt proud, not of any revenge I could take, but of the life I was creating. Sometimes, I thought about Ethan. Not with anger, but with clarity. I understood his regret, his desperation, his failure, but it didn't matter to me anymore. He had played his part in my story, but he no longer had a role. He faded naturally into the background of my life, like a shadow that could no longer follow me. I also noticed how much stronger I had become. I trusted myself in ways I never had before. I made decisions without fear of judgment. I knew my worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. That understanding was far more powerful than any argument or confrontation could ever be. Most importantly, I held my child close and felt the joy of building a life grounded in love, respect, and security. Every smile, every small milestone, was a reminder that we were safe and free. That freedom, that quiet independence, was my true victory. In the end, I realized something essential: humiliation doesn't define you. What defines you is how you rise afterward. I had been small once, afraid and trapped. Now, I was strong, steady, and in control. My past didn't disappear, but it couldn't touch me anymore. I was building my life, step by step, on my own terms, and that was enough.